The night Eric left, the wind sounded like it was tearing the town in half. Not the kind of wind you forget. The kind that crawls under the door, into the bones, and makes everything feel final. Hazel stood on the porch steps of her family's small farmhouse with a thin sweater pulled tight around her arms, staring at the pickup truck lights disappearing down the gravel road like two fading stars. No screaming, no scene, just a quiet that felt like betrayal. He didn't leave with cruelty. He left with fear dressed up as ambition, pride disguised as purpose. A note, a promise that meant nothing once his tires hit the highway. And Hazel, who had once believed love could hold a man steady, learned the kind of pain that doesn't just hurt, it changes you. Days turned into weeks, weeks into seasons. The fields went from bare to green to gold, and back to empty again, and Hazel stopped measuring time by calendars. She measured it by what she survived. She worked. She studied. She learned how to stand in rooms where people whispered her story like it was entertainment. And somewhere along the way, she stopped being the girl he left behind. By the time the town's Christmas lights came down and the new year crept in with its cold, honest dawn, Hazel had built a life that didn't need saving. Then, on a morning when the sky was the color of steel and the roads were still lined with thin snow, a familiar truck rolled back into town. Slow, careful, like it wasn't sure it deserved to be seen. Eric stepped out looking successful, but not untouchable. Older, quieter, humbled in a way his expensive coat couldn't hide. Hazel saw him across the street, outside the small town hospital where she now worked. And for a second the past rose up like a wave. But she didn't drown. She didn't run. And she didn't cry. She just looked at the man who once broke her and wondered the only question that mattered now. Was it too late? And if you stay until the end, you'll see the exact moment Hazel finally decides whether Eric deserves the woman she became, or whether his return will be the last lesson he ever learns. If you believe love can be rebuilt, subscribe and comment. I choose healing. The storm arrived before Eric said goodbye. Snow came down in slanted sheets over Maplewood Ridge. The grain silos disappeared into a white blur beyond Main Street. Hazel watched the porch light flicker like it was unsure. Inside the farmhouse, the kettle hissed and forgot to whistle. Her mother had gone to bed, pretending not to hear the tension, and Eric stood in the doorway like a man already halfway gone. He looked too clean for that kind of weather. Wool coat, polished boots, jaw tight with rehearsed certainty. The kind of certainty that usually means fear hiding underneath. Hazel searched his eyes for softness, for truth, for a reason, but what she found was distance, carefully measured and controlled. He kept his hands in his pockets like touch might undo him. Outside, the wind hit the window like a warning. "It's just a job," he said, voice low, almost gentle. "A scholarship lead, an offer in the city, a fast track." He spoke in sentences that sounded like a speech to strangers. Hazel heard every word and still felt like she was mishearing. Because love didn't leave in the middle of winter storms. Love didn't pack dreams into a suitcase and call it destiny. Love stayed and faced the hard parts without running. Hazel didn't beg because she wasn't built that way, but her chest tightened like someone had tied a rope around it. She asked questions with calmness that cost her everything. "When did you decide, Eric? Before you held my hand last night? Before you told my father you'd fix the fence in spring? Before you promised me we'd build a life right here in these fields?" He blinked, and that blink felt like a confession. Eric's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. He wanted to say he was doing this for them, for a future. He wanted to say he'd come back as a man worthy of her, but the truth was uglier and smaller than ambition. He was terrified of being ordinary in a town where love was real. Terrified that if he stayed, he'd have to grow up the hard way. So he chose distance, because distance felt like control. Hazel stepped closer, slow, like approaching something wounded. She reached for his sleeve and he flinched before he recovered. That single reflex told her more than a paragraph of excuses. He was already practicing how to live without being held. Her fingers fell back to her side and she steadied her breath. "You're leaving tonight," she said, not asking, just naming it. Eric nodded once, the smallest movement with the biggest consequence. The kitchen clock ticked loud enough to sound cruel. Hazel stared at the table where his coffee mug sat unfinished, a ring of heat on the wood like proof of something fading. Her mind raced through memories: Sunday church, summer fairs, late-night talks, his laughter when he carried her over puddles like it was a vow, the way he had looked at her once like she was home. And now he looked at her like she was a chapter he'd outgrow. "Don't hate me," Eric said, finally letting the words fall. It wasn't an apology. It was a request for comfort. Hazel felt the unfairness of it like a slap across her ribs. He wanted her kindness to make his leaving feel less ugly. But she wouldn't hand him peace while her own heart was breaking. So she nodded. Not forgiveness, not permission, just restraint. "Just don't lie," she whispered, and he looked away. He went to the coat rack like a man on a schedule. Hazel followed him to the porch without thinking. Snow dusted her hair, melting into cold threads against her skin. The driveway was a narrow ribbon disappearing into the storm. His truck idled, headlights cutting a tunnel through the white. Eric paused at the steps like he might turn back if he breathed wrong. Hazel waited, still hoping he would choose courage. He leaned in as if to kiss her and stopped. Like his own lips didn't trust his promises anymore. Hazel felt something inside her fracture. Quiet, precise, permanent. She had imagined goodbye as tears and arms and last words. But this goodbye was worse because it was empty, a missing note in the middle of the song. Eric lowered his forehead to hers for 1 second, then stepped away. The truck door slammed, and the sound echoed off the barn. Hazel didn't move because if she moved, she might shatter. She watched him pull down the driveway without looking back. The taillights blurred, swallowed by snow, swallowed by distance, and the air tasted metallic, like the world had turned to iron. Her hands curled into fists inside her sleeves, nails digging in. She told herself she wouldn't chase someone who chose to run. When she went inside, the house felt unfamiliar. Warm, yes, but warmth couldn't undo abandonment. She found the envelope on the counter like it had been waiting, her name written in Eric's careful handwriting, too neat to be kind. Hazel stared at it for a long moment, breathing shallow. Then she opened it, because pain still demands to be read. The paper trembled in her hands like it already knew. "Hazel, I'm doing this for us. I can't stay here and become someone I'll regret. Please understand, this isn't goodbye forever." Every line was polished, controlled, convenient. He wrote about timing, pressure, opportunity, growing into the man you deserve. But he never wrote the one word she needed most. "I'm sorry." Hazel folded the letter with calm hands and burning eyes. She didn't cry right away, which surprised her. Instead, she cleaned the kitchen like routine could fix a torn world. She washed the mug, wiped the counters, stacked the plates. Her body kept moving because stopping felt like falling. Her heart was a locked door, and she didn't have the key yet. In the living room, the old family Bible lay open on the table. The verse on the page read like a whisper: "He heals the brokenhearted." Hazel stood there, staring at that line until her throat tightened. Not because she suddenly felt healed. She didn't. But because the words reminded her she wasn't alone in the dark. Outside, the storm kept raging, and the town slept through her ending. She pressed the letter between the Bible pages like a marker in her life. If Eric wanted to leave, fine. She wouldn't make him the center of her story. She would survive even if survival was the only thing she could do tonight. In the morning, Maplewood Ridge would look innocent again. Kids would walk to school, trucks would pass the diner, life would continue. Someone would mention Eric's name like it was normal. And Hazel would have to learn how to carry a wound quietly. She pictured the hospital on Main Street, the nurses, the steady work. She pictured the farm, the fence line, the fields waiting for spring. And she realized she still had a life. One he didn't get to take with him. That thought didn't remove the pain, but it gave it shape. Pain was not a sentence. It was a season, and Hazel had lived through enough winters to trust the thaw. She went to her bedroom, changed into clean clothes, and brushed her hair. Not for anyone to admire, just to remind herself she still existed. She looked in the mirror and met her own eyes without flinching. "I won't disappear," she told her reflection, voice steady, promise real. Downstairs, the clock kept ticking, faithful and indifferent. Hazel placed the letter in a drawer and shut it with a soft click. The sound felt like a door closing on the version of her that waited. Outside, the wind eased, leaving the world quiet and white. Somewhere beyond the storm, Eric drove toward the life he thought he wanted. Here, Hazel stood in the life she would build with her own hands. And without knowing it yet, she had just taken her first step toward becoming untouchable. Morning came, like it didn't know what it had done. The snow softened into glitter under a pale winter sun. Maplewood Ridge looked almost holy from Hazel's window, but inside her chest, everything felt bruised and loud. She dressed for work with hands that didn't quite belong to her. She tied her boots like she was tying down a breaking heart, and she walked outside without looking for his tire tracks. The town was small enough to feel every absence. At Miller's diner, the bell rang and the same faces turned. People smiled too quickly, like kindness could erase questions. Hazel ordered coffee she didn't want and kept her voice steady. Someone mentioned the storm, not the goodbye hidden inside it. Someone asked about Eric as if he'd simply stepped out for milk. Hazel said, "He left," and watched silence spread like spilled ink. Rumors traveled faster than farm trucks on Route 9. Some said Eric got a big opportunity and Hazel understood. Some said she'd pushed him away with too much seriousness. Hazel let them talk, because she refused to become a headline. Her pain wasn't community property, no matter how tight the town felt. She learned to smile without inviting anyone into the wound. And she learned that survival sometimes looks like politeness. The small hospital on Main Street smelled like antiseptic and hope. Hazel moved through the halls in a soft blue scrub top. Her job was humble, but it mattered, and it demanded presence. Sick kids didn't care about her heartbreak, and neither did emergencies. She took vitals, changed bandages, calmed shaking hands, and every time she helped someone breathe easier, she felt less powerless. It was the first place her life didn't revolve around his absence. At night, though, the quiet came back for its payment. Her bedroom felt too large for a single heartbeat. She heard the house settle, the pipes click, the old wood sigh. She stared at the ceiling and replayed his last look like a cruel film. Not the leaving. What haunted her was how easy he made it seem. She pressed her palm to her sternum and tried to breathe through it. Somewhere in the dark, she whispered, "God, don't let this break me." Hazel didn't collapse in public, and that became its own myth. People mistook her silence for strength without cost. They didn't see her hands shaking in the hospital supply closet. They didn't see her grip the sink until her knuckles went white. They didn't see tears she refused to give the world as evidence. She wasn't trying to be impressive. She was trying to remain standing. Because if she fell, she feared she'd never get back up. Her mother watched her with the careful eyes of a woman who'd lived. No interrogation, no speeches, just quiet meals and warm laundry. One evening, her mother placed a bowl of soup in front of her. Then she said, "He made a choice, Hazel. But you still get yours." Hazel swallowed hard, tasting salt that wasn't from the soup. She nodded once, because agreement was easier than grief. And she realized she'd been waiting for permission to keep living. Sunday arrived with church bells and familiar hymns. Hazel sat in the same pew, hands folded, spine straight. The pastor spoke about seasons, about pruning, about new growth. The words landed like they were written for her hidden bruise. When the choir sang, Hazel felt something loosen behind her ribs. Not relief, just a small space where hope could someday fit. She walked out into cold air and decided she would not be ashamed. The first letter from Eric arrived 2 weeks later. A plain envelope, city postmark, his neat handwriting again. Hazel held it over the trash can like it might bite. Her fingers trembled, but her face stayed calm. She read it once, then twice, and felt nothing she could name as love. He wrote about work, pressure, missing her, thinking of coming back soon. Hazel folded it slowly and did not answer. Silence became Hazel's boundary, and boundaries became her armor. She didn't post quotes about healing or cry in front of friends. She didn't drive by his old place, didn't replay their songs on purpose. She showed up to work, to family dinners, to life. Consistently, every time she chose routine, she stole power back from the past. People expected her to unravel, and when she didn't, they grew uneasy. Because a woman who rebuilds is harder to pity and harder to control. Winter turned toward early spring with muddy roads and thin sunlight. The farms woke slowly, like they were testing the air for safety. Hazel helped her father mend fence lines on Saturdays. Her gloves were torn, her cheeks pink from cold, her body sore, but the physical work quieted the noise inside her head. She learned to measure strength by what she could carry without complaint, and she learned her hands were capable of building, not just holding on. At the hospital, a new nurse asked about the ring Hazel never wore. It wasn't cruel, just curiosity with no awareness of landmines. Hazel looked at her own bare hand and felt the old sting rise. Then she breathed out and answered with a gentle honesty. "There was someone," she said, "but I'm not waiting for anyone anymore." The words surprised even her because they sounded like freedom. And for the first time, she believed them enough to stand by them. Eric called one night, and his name lit up her screen like a dare. Hazel stared until the ringing stopped, heart steady, palms sweating. When he called again, she let it go again. It wasn't revenge. It was self-respect practicing its voice. He left without explaining the hard parts so she wouldn't hand him easy access. Hazel slid the phone into a drawer and went back to her paperwork. She chose peace over curiosity, and it felt like a victory. The town's charity drive arrived with flyers and casseroles and planning meetings. The hospital needed funds for new equipment and rural outreach visits. Hazel volunteered without hesitation, surprising the older staff. She organized schedules, called donors, wrote thank you cards in neat ink. She stood in front of the community center and spoke with calm authority. Her voice didn't shake, even when eyes watched her like they were learning her. And she realized pain had sharpened her into someone dependable. One afternoon, she found Eric's old hoodie in a closet box. Soft gray fabric, faint scent of cedar, and something painfully familiar. The memory hit her like a sudden drop in temperature. For a moment, she almost hugged it, almost let nostalgia win. Then she folded it carefully, as if it belonged to a stranger. She carried the box to the donation bin behind the church, and when she walked away, she felt lighter and terrifyingly alone. Alone didn't mean broken, she reminded herself. It meant she was learning how to be whole without being held. She started taking evening classes at the community college nearby. Nursing certification, leadership training, anything that pointed forward. She studied at the diner after shifts, surrounded by clinking plates. Her life began to fill with goals that didn't include his return. And slowly, the ache stopped being the center of the room. Still, some nights the grief tried to bargain. It whispered, "If he comes back, everything will make sense." Hazel answered those thoughts with quiet truth. Not everything deserves a second chance. She wrote in a notebook when it got heavy, pages of anger, faith, and clarity. She prayed in simple sentences, not polished ones, because God didn't need performance. She asked for wisdom, not romance, for strength, not revenge. And the more she prayed, the more her spine felt like her own again. By the time the first green showed in the fields, Hazel had changed. Not dramatically, not loudly, but in ways that could not be undone. She laughed again at the nurse's station without forcing it. She stopped flinching when someone said Eric's name. And when the mail arrived, she no longer ran from the sound. Somewhere far away, Eric might still believe he had time, but Hazel was no longer living as if her life depended on his return. Spring didn't arrive like a celebration in Maplewood Ridge. It came like permission, slow and cautious. Mud replaced snow, and the roads turned soft at the edges. Hazel drove to the hospital with her windows cracked for fresh air. She let the smell of wet earth remind her that endings aren't permanent. She didn't feel healed yet, but she felt moving. And moving, she learned, was its own kind of miracle. The town watched her the way small towns always do. Not with cruelty, not always with kindness. Mostly with curiosity. They expected her to fold into the shape of what happened. They expected bitterness, or desperation, or a new man too soon. Instead, Hazel stayed steady and became harder to label. She smiled when she meant it, and went quiet when she didn't. People couldn't tell if she was fine, and that made them respectful. At the hospital, Hazel's hands learned confidence. She learned how to read pain without being consumed by it. She learned how to speak gently to frightened families. She learned how to hold pressure without letting it crack her voice. The nurses trusted her with the difficult patients first, not because she was the loudest, but because she stayed present. Presence became her signature, and everyone could feel it. Some evenings, she stayed late to help with rural outreach planning. Maplewood Ridge wasn't just fields. It was distances that cost lives. Old farmers who waited too long. Mothers who couldn't afford time off. Hazel made calls, built schedules, organized supplies in neat rows. She listened to stories the way a person listens when they're not in a hurry. The work filled the hollow places without asking her to pretend, and slowly her heart stopped centering itself around what she'd lost. Summer arrived with its own honest heat. The corn grew tall, and the sun stayed up like it had nowhere else to be. Hazel helped her father at dawn before her shifts. She hauled feed, checked water lines, patched what storms had tried to take. Sweat on her skin reminded her she was alive, not abandoned. Her body became stronger, and her mind followed. She stopped thinking of endurance as punishment and started calling it training. The town's community center hosted a fundraiser under paper lanterns. Hazel stood behind the sign-in table with a clipboard and quiet authority. She greeted donors like she belonged in every room she entered. No trembling, no apology, no shrinking to make others comfortable. When the mayor asked her opinion on hospital needs, she answered clearly. Her clarity made men in suits nod like students. Hazel didn't chase respect anymore. She simply carried it. She was careful with her heart in ways she hadn't been before. Not guarded like a prison, but protected like something valuable. She went to coffee with friends and laughed without scanning for shadows. She danced once at a summer fair, barefoot on grass, hair loose in the breeze. And when someone mentioned Eric casually, Hazel didn't stiffen. His name was no longer a knife. It was a scar. Scars, she knew now, didn't control the hand that earned them. The letters from Eric stopped arriving as often. At first, Hazel noticed the silence like a missing tooth. Then she noticed how little it changed her day. She didn't romanticize his absence anymore. She didn't imagine him suffering just to make her pain feel fair. She simply accepted what was. He chose a road without her, and she chose to stop living at the edge of someone else's decision. In late summer, Hazel enrolled in advanced certification courses. She studied at night with textbooks spread like maps across her bed. She learned new protocols, new procedures, new ways to save lives faster. Her brain loved the challenge, the sharpness, the forward motion. Somewhere between chapters and exams, she realized something startling. She had grown into a woman Eric had never met, and that woman didn't belong to anyone's past. Autumn came, and Maplewood Ridge turned gold like a hymn. The fields swayed under a soft wind, heavy with harvest. Hazel volunteered at the church pantry, stacking canned goods with patient hands. She drove elderly neighbors to appointments when their trucks wouldn't start. She learned the town's pain was larger than her own heartbreak. Helping didn't erase her story, but it placed it in perspective. And perspective gave her dignity that no abandonment could steal. One afternoon, a little boy in pediatrics refused to speak. He stared at the wall like his voice had been taken away. Hazel sat beside him without rushing, without demanding. She offered a crayon and waited like waiting was holy. Minutes passed. Then a small hand reached out. The boy drew a shaky heart, then looked at Hazel for approval. She smiled softly, and the room felt warmer than the heater could manage. That night, Hazel drove home with the radio off. The silence in the car no longer felt like loneliness. It felt like space. Room for thought, room for breath, room for peace. She watched the sunset spill red across the barns and distant fences. Years ago, she would have wanted someone beside her to make it meaningful. Now, meaning arrived without permission from another person. She realized she was becoming someone she could depend on. Winter returned, but it wasn't the same winter. Snow dusted the roads, and the town put up lights again. This time, Hazel didn't flinch at cold nights or dark mornings. She had survived the storm that once ended her world. She had built routines strong enough to hold her upright. She hung a wreath on the farmhouse door for her mother's joy. and she didn't attach any part of her heart to what might come next. On New Year's Eve, the hospital stayed busy like always. Accidents, fevers, an older man with chest pain who waited too long. Hazel moved through it all with calm leadership. A doctor asked for her input, and she gave it without hesitating. When a nurse panicked, Hazel steadied her with a simple hand on her shoulder. She wasn't just surviving shifts anymore, she was shaping outcomes. And the pride she felt wasn't loud, it was rooted. After midnight, Hazel stepped outside for a breath of air. The sky was clear, cold, scattered with stars like promises. Somewhere in the distance, fireworks bloomed over the fields. Hazel pulled her coat tighter and let the quiet wrap around her. She thought about the girl she had been when Eric left. Then she thought about the woman she was now, standing unshaken. And she whispered a prayer of gratitude for the strength she didn't know she had. She didn't make resolutions that year. She made commitments, deeper, steadier, less performative, to keep learning, to keep serving, to keep choosing truth over fantasy, to never again confuse intensity with safety, to never again hand someone access to her heart without consistency. She walked back inside the hospital with her head lifted, because she had become her own beginning. 2 days later, a winter storm warning rolled across the news. Maplewood Ridge prepared like it always did. Salt, supplies, shared rides. Hazel helped coordinate emergency staffing and shelter arrangements. She checked on neighbors, delivered blankets, made sure no one was alone. Her town trusted her now, not as a symbol but as a pillar. And Hazel realized something quietly powerful. Her pain had become purpose, and purpose had become power. That same evening, as she locked the hospital doors after her shift, Hazel saw headlights slow at the edge of the parking lot. A truck she didn't recognize at first, moving carefully through thin snow. The driver didn't honk, didn't rush, didn't announce himself. The engine went quiet, and a door opened into cold air. Hazel's breath caught, not from fear but from a memory waking up. Because the shape of that silhouette stepping out felt like a past returning to test her present. The headlights cut through the snowfall like a confession. Hazel stayed still near the hospital doors, keyring cold in her palm. The parking lot was quiet, the world muted by winter. She watched the truck roll to a careful stop beside the curb. No music blasting, no dramatic skid, no show. Just a slow arrival, like the driver feared being seen. And Hazel felt the past rise, then settle under her control. The door opened and Eric stepped out into the white air. He looked the same in the ways that didn't matter anymore. Tall, familiar shoulders, that face the town once adored. But his posture had changed, like pride had been taught to bow. His coat was expensive, yet it didn't make him untouchable. His eyes carried something heavier than success. Regret, quiet, mature, and finally real. Hazel didn't move toward him. She didn't step back either. She simply held her ground like the earth under her boots. Eric closed the truck door softly, as if noise would offend her. He walked a few steps, then stopped with distance still between them. That pause told her he remembered the way he left. It told her he knew he'd forfeited the right to rush. "Hazel," he said, and her name sounded different in his mouth. Not like a claim, not like a memory to keep warm, like a truth he wasn't sure he deserved to speak aloud. Hazel's heartbeat stayed steady, and she thanked herself for that. She had rehearsed this moment in nightmares years ago, but now that it was real, she felt strangely calm, as if she had already survived the worst part, his absence. Eric swallowed, eyes flicking to the hospital entrance. He noticed her badge, the scrubs under her coat, the tired strength. His gaze lingered on her face like he was searching for the old girl, the one who would soften, the one who would explain his choices for him. But Hazel didn't offer him that version of herself. She wasn't cold, she was clear. "Why are you here?" she asked, voice controlled and honest. He breathed out slowly and the air fogged between them. "I came back," he said, like that should mean something on its own. Hazel waited, letting silence do what it was meant to do. It forced truth to stand without decoration. Eric's jaw tightened, then loosened like he chose humility on purpose. "I should have come sooner," he admitted. "And I should have come different." Hazel's eyes didn't widen. She didn't tilt her head like she was curious. She looked at him like a woman reading a chart. Facts first, emotion second. Sooner, she repeated softly, tasting the arrogance hidden in the word. As if time was yours to control. Eric flinched, not theatrically, but like the sentence landed where it should. He nodded once, accepting the hit without defending himself. "I didn't know how to face you," he said. "I built a life that looked impressive from the outside. And every time it got quiet, I heard that door closing behind me." Hazel felt the memory of that night like a distant ache. Not sharp anymore, but present, like weather in old bones. "You left," she said. Simple, steady, lethal. "And I lived with it." Eric's eyes shone, but he didn't let tears perform for him. He kept his hands visible, empty like he had nothing to hide. "I'm not here to ask you to forget," he said. "I'm not here to talk you into anything." Hazel watched him carefully, searching for manipulation's shadow. But what she saw was exhaustion in the truest sense. The exhaustion of a man tired of running from his own character. "So what are you here for?" Hazel asked again. Her breath came out steady, even as the cold bit her cheeks. Eric glanced down at the snow, then back up with effort. "To be accountable," he said, voice rough around the edges. "To make it right where I can, and to accept whatever you decide." Hazel held that sentence up to the light, testing it for cracks. For a moment, the hospital door opened behind Hazel. A nurse waved goodbye and hurried to her car, boots crunching ice. Life moved around them like it always had. Hazel realized the town didn't pause for reconciliation stories. That made this moment more real, less romantic, more dangerous. Because there was no soundtrack to hide behind. Only two people, and the truth between them. "You didn't just leave me," Hazel said, voice low. "You left my life, my family, my future. You left me to explain your absence to people who loved you." Eric's throat worked, and he nodded again. Slower. "I know," he whispered, and it sounded like punishment accepted. Hazel felt anger rise, not hot but clean. Anger that finally respected itself enough to speak. Eric took one careful step forward and stopped again. "Tell me what you need from me," he said. Hazel almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was late. "You don't get to offer me a menu," she replied. "You don't get to act like I'm a problem to solve." Eric's face tightened with shame, and he exhaled. "You're right," he said quietly. "I'm sorry." The apology landed differently than his old words ever had. Not polished, not protected, not wrapped in ambition, just two simple syllables with weight behind them. Hazel didn't forgive him for saying it, but she did register that he finally could. She stepped closer just enough to make him look her in the eyes. "Why now?" she asked, the question that mattered most. Eric's gaze held, and Hazel saw the man beneath the success. "There was a moment," he said, "when I realized I'd become everything I feared. Rich in results, poor in integrity." He swallowed, voice breaking slightly without letting it turn dramatic. "I kept winning, and I kept feeling hollow, and the only person I couldn't outrun was you." Hazel felt the truth of that sentence like a slow drumbeat. Hazel didn't soften, but she didn't harden either. She remembered the girl who would have folded into hope too fast. Then she looked at the woman who had learned to require evidence. "You can't undo what you did," she said. Eric nodded, eyes steady, accepting the limit. "But you can stop repeating it," she continued. "And if you're here to prove that, it won't be with words." Eric's shoulders lowered as if he'd been waiting for that exact line. "Tell me how," he said, and his voice held no bargaining. Hazel pointed lightly toward the hospital behind her. "We're short-staffed," she said. "We're underfunded. People out here don't get second chances with their health." Eric followed her gaze, jaw tightening with purpose. "I can help," he said, and Hazel watched him choose responsibility. The wind shifted, and snow swirled around them like restless ghosts. Hazel turned toward the entrance, keys flashing under the lights. She didn't invite him in like a lover. She didn't send him away like a stranger. She opened a door, the first one he would have to earn his way through. Eric stood quietly, waiting for permission he hadn't deserved for years. And Hazel realized his return wasn't the ending. It was the test. The next morning, Maplewood Ridge woke under thin, quiet snow. Hazel arrived at the hospital before sunrise, coffee untouched. She expected Eric's return to echo like gossip down Main Street. Instead, the hall stayed focused on fevers, fractures, and real life. That's what made her chest tighten. No one would rescue her from this. If anything changed, it would change in the ordinary hours. And Hazel had learned. The ordinary is where truth lives. In the staff room, the administrator looked tired enough to crack. Budget cuts, broken equipment, understaffed shifts, too many miles to cover. Hazel listened with her clipboard steady and her mind already solving. When the door opened and Eric stepped in, conversation stalled mid-sentence. He didn't smile like a man seeking forgiveness through charm. He introduced himself like a stranger who knew he'd earned suspicion. "I'm here to ask what the hospital needs," he said, plain and calm. Hazel didn't speak for him, and she didn't defend him either. She watched the room the way a nurse watches a patient's breathing. Eric stood with his hands visible, shoulders lowered, eyes attentive. No grand speech, no name-dropping, no, "I can fix everything." He took notes like he was the one being evaluated. The administrator listed priorities and Eric asked careful questions. And Hazel felt something unsettling. He was listening, like it mattered. After the meeting, Eric waited by the vending machines in silence. He didn't corner Hazel, didn't reach for old familiarity. When she passed, he stepped aside instead of stepping in. "That schedule you mentioned," he said gently. "Who handles outreach?" Hazel stopped and turned, expression unreadable on purpose. "I do," she answered, giving him nothing but fact. Eric nodded. "Then I'll follow your lead," he said, and meant it. His first action was not money, and that surprised her. He showed up in work boots at the supply dock, sleeves rolled up. He carried boxes, sorted donations, cleaned a storage room without being asked. He listened when a nurse complained about a broken monitor. He asked where the maintenance log was kept and wrote the details down. No cameras, no announcements, just quiet labor under fluorescent lights. Hazel hated how much that steadiness disturbed her defenses. Later that day, Eric met the hospital's maintenance supervisor. The man was blunt, skeptical, and unimpressed by polished coats. Eric didn't try to buy his respect with charm or status. He asked what parts were needed, what vendors were reliable, what could be repaired. He offered to cover costs, but only after learning the real constraints. "Do it right," he said, "or don't do it at all." Hazel overheard and felt her throat tighten with reluctant respect. By Friday, new equipment orders were already in process. Hazel checked the paperwork twice, expecting loopholes or ego. But the forms were clean, approvals fast, payments confirmed. Eric didn't attach his name to a plaque or demand a thank you photo. He simply asked for a timeline and what else would reduce delays. The administrator blinked like he didn't know how to respond to humility. Hazel didn't smile, but something in her chest eased by 1 degree. Still, she kept her boundaries as firm as winter ground. Eric didn't earn closeness because he showed up for 1 week. He didn't earn tenderness because he finally learned to say sorry. Hazel watched his patterns, his tone, his patience when no one praised him. She observed how he handled inconvenience, how he treated tired nurses. She watched whether he asked for access or accepted limits. Because change was not a moment, it was a trail of choices. The town noticed him at the diner on Sunday morning. Not holding court, not reliving the past, just sitting quietly with coffee. He spoke to the waitress like she was a human being, not a service. He tipped without showing off, asked about her mother's health, remembered names. Hazel saw this from a corner booth with a friend from the clinic. Her friend whispered, "He looks different," and Hazel didn't answer. She couldn't afford opinions yet, only evidence. Eric started helping with outreach the following week. He rode along in Hazel's truck, maps spread between them like a treaty. They drove past fields and fences, past barns half buried in snowdrifts. Hazel gave instructions with professional distance, voice steady, eyes forward. Eric followed them without questioning her authority or challenging her competence. When the roads got rough, he got out to clear ice from the tires. He didn't complain once, and Hazel noticed every quiet second of it. At a farmhouse outside town, An elderly man needed oxygen checks. Hazel moved through the small living room with practiced gentleness. Eric stayed behind her shoulder, silent and respectful, learning by watching. When the man's wife apologized for the mess, Hazel reassured her softly. Eric carried water jugs from the porch without being asked. He repaired a loose step with a borrowed hammer, hands steady in the cold, and Hazel's mind whispered, "This is what staying looks like." On the drive back, Eric didn't reach for conversation to soften her. He stared at the road like it was teaching him something. Finally, he said, "I used to think love was a feeling." Hazel kept her eyes on the windshield, refusing to be pulled too close. Eric continued, "Now I think it's responsibility, especially when it's inconvenient." The words weren't romantic. They were heavy and honest. Hazel's silence wasn't cruelty. It was discernment doing its job. That night, Hazel found him alone in the hospital hallway. He was reading a posted list of rural patients who needed follow-ups. The board looked like a map of people the world forgets. Eric traced a name with his finger, then dropped his hand. "I didn't know how much you carry," he said quietly. Hazel met his gaze, not softened, not hardened, just true. "I carried it because someone had to," she replied, and he nodded. Eric didn't try to defend his past with a sad story. He didn't claim trauma as a shield or ambition as an excuse. He simply said, "I see what I cost you," and swallowed the shame. Hazel felt anger rise. Clean, deserved, still alive after all these years. "You don't get to be proud of this version of you," she said. "You should have been him when it mattered." Eric held her stare and answered, "I know," without flinching away. The next morning, he proved it again in small ways. He showed up early, asked what needed doing, and did it quietly. He learned the rhythm of the hospital like a man learning humility by practice. He offered rides during the storm warning so nurses wouldn't drive alone. He shoveled the clinic walkway before anyone could ask. And when someone thanked him, he only said, "It's the least I can do." Hazel watched, torn between caution and a hope she didn't trust yet. But healing isn't a door that opens because someone knocks politely. It's a house rebuilt plank by plank with weather fighting every nail. Hazel felt her old wounds react to Eric's presence like a bruise touched. Some moments, she wanted to believe him because belief would be easier. Other moments, she wanted to push him away to protect her peace. She prayed in short, honest sentences while washing her hands at work. "God, let me be wise. Let me not mistake effort for endurance." On New Year's weekend, a sudden storm hit harder than expected. A pileup on the county road sent patients flooding the ER at once. Hazel moved like fire, focused, fast, unshaken by chaos. Eric stayed out of the way until he was needed, then became useful. He called in supplies, coordinated transport, helped families find warmth and blankets. No ego, no panic, no disappearing when things got ugly. Hazel saw it and felt a truth settle. He didn't run this time. After the last patient was stabilized, Hazel stepped outside to breathe. Snow drifted down under the street lamp like soft ash. Eric joined her at a respectful distance, hands in his coat pockets. He didn't ask for forgiveness, and he didn't ask for her heart. He only said, "I'm here, tomorrow too," like a vow made of consistency. Hazel looked at the hospital lights glowing behind them like a promise of service, and for the first time she wondered if redemption could be proven in days that repeat. The storm left the town bruised, but breathing. Snowbanks rose like walls along Main Street, trapping cars and schedules. Hazel slept in short fragments between shifts, coffee becoming her bloodstream. In the hospital, the air stayed tense with aftershock and exhaustion. Eric kept showing up like a steady pulse, never asking to be noticed. He carried blankets, ran errands, listened when people snapped from stress. And Hazel learned that consistency can be louder than any apology. On Tuesday morning, the generator sputtered during a heavy intake hour. Lights flickered, machines beeped in anxious rhythms. A nurse whispered, "Not now," like the building could hear her fear. Hazel moved fast, calling protocols, assigning hands to tasks. Eric didn't freeze. He didn't stand back and watch heroically. He called the maintenance supervisor, then a backup supplier, then a tech. Within minutes, the stabilization plan was in motion. Quiet, efficient, real. Hazel watched him from the nurse's station, chest tight. This was the kind of pressure that had once made him run. The kind of pressure that exposed character with no mercy. Eric took orders, asked questions, moved without making it about himself. When the lights returned to full strength, he didn't exhale dramatically. He simply checked on the staff like he belonged to responsibility now. And Hazel felt the smallest crack form in her certainty that people never change. That afternoon, a call came from a farm 15 miles out. A pregnant woman in early distress, road still slick, ambulance delayed. Hazel grabbed the outreach kit without hesitation. Eric was already at the truck, keys in hand, waiting for direction. "We'll take my route," Hazel said, voice firm. Eric nodded once and drove like someone who understood life was fragile. The tires hissed over ice, and the world narrowed to the road and breath. The farmhouse smelled like hay, wood smoke, and fear. The woman's husband paced like his spine couldn't hold him upright. Hazel moved in, calm as a prayer, hands steady over trembling skin. She spoke with gentle authority, grounding the room. Eric stayed near the doorway, quiet, watching Hazel work like she was sacred. When Hazel asked for towels and hot water, Eric moved instantly, no questions. He didn't perform, he served, and the difference mattered. When the ambulance finally arrived, Hazel walked the family through the plan. She promised nothing she couldn't guarantee, but she offered hope with honesty. The husband gripped Hazel's hand like she was his last rope. Eric watched that grip, the trust Hazel earned without demanding it. On the drive back, neither of them spoke for miles. Snow fell softly, and the sky hung low and gray. Hazel felt her emotions rise like weather, unpredictable, undeniable, finally asking to be seen. "You're good at this," Eric said quietly, staring ahead. Hazel's jaw tightened because praise from him still felt dangerous. She didn't want his admiration to become the door he used to enter again. "I'm trained," she replied, clipped and factual. Eric nodded, accepting the boundary without pushing it. Then he said, "No, good. Not just trained. You're steady." Hazel's grip tightened on her own coat, as if steadiness was all she had left. They pulled into the hospital parking lot at dusk. The building glowed warm against the cold, a lighthouse for broken things. Hazel didn't get out right away. Eric didn't either. He waited like he had learned patience through pain. Hazel stared at the steering wheel, breath shallow. "Eric," she said at last, voice low, controlled. He turned slightly, attentive, not hopeful, just present. "You don't get to be proud of me," Hazel said. The words came out sharper than she intended, but they were true. "You don't get to look at what I built and call it beautiful." Eric's face tightened, shame flickering in his eyes. "I know," he whispered. "I know you built it because I left." Hazel swallowed, throat burning with years she never spent on softness. "And that," she said, "is why your presence hurts." Eric didn't defend himself with sadness. He didn't say, "But I'm here now." Like now was enough. He took the hit like a man who finally understood consequences. "I don't want to take credit," he said. "I don't want to make your strength a romantic story." Hazel's eyes stung, and she hated how close relief and rage lived. "Then why are you here?" she asked, voice cracking at the edge of control. Eric's hand stayed still, palms open on his knees. "Because I needed to face what I did," he said slowly. "And because I'm tired of being the man who runs." Hazel looked at him then, really looked. Not the suit, not the success, not the jawline her younger self once trusted. She saw the exhaustion behind his eyes, the kind that comes from self-disgust. And she realized humility, when real, is ugly in an honest way. Hazel's voice dropped to a whisper she rarely allowed. "Do you know what it was like?" she asked. "To wake up and remember you weren't coming back? To hear your name like a joke people shared over coffee? To smile at my mother while she pretended not to cry?" Eric's throat worked, and his eyes shone without performance. "Yes," he said, "because I've replayed it for years, and it never gets softer." Hazel shook her head once, bitterness rising like heat. "You replayed it," she said. I lived it. The sentence sat between them like a verdict. Eric nodded, and the nod looked like surrender. I can't change that, he said, but I can stop adding to it. Hazel stared out the windshield at drifting snow. Her heart wanted safety, not poetry, and safety had to be earned slowly. When they finally stepped inside, Hazel went straight to the supply room. She closed the door and leaned against the shelf, breathing hard. For a moment, tears threatened, like they had been waiting years for permission. Hazel wiped her face quickly, angry at herself for being human. Then she heard a soft knock. One knock, not repeated. Eric's voice came through the door, gentle and restrained. I'm not asking to come in, he said. I just want you to know I'm here. Hazel's eyes closed and her chest ached with the unfairness of timing. He was learning tenderness now, after she learned survival. She steadied herself, opened the door, and stepped out with control restored. Eric stood back, giving her space like it was sacred ground. Don't follow me into my pain, Hazel said quietly. I won't, Eric replied. I'll stand outside it until you decide otherwise. Hazel swallowed, because that was the first sentence that sounded like respect. Days turned into a rhythm of work and quiet conversation. Not dates, not romance, not apologies repeated until they lost meaning. Just small moments where Eric proved he could be near without taking. He brought coffee for the night shift and asked nothing in return. He fixed a nurse's flat tire in the snow, hands numb, mouth silent. He joined Hazel on outreach calls and stayed teachable, humble, consistent. And Hazel's heart began to do something frightening. It began to unclench. One evening, Hazel stayed late to chart patient notes. The hallway was dim, the hospital quiet, the world outside frozen. Eric waited near the lobby with a bag of donated blankets over his arm. He looked up when she finished, not like a man entitled to her time. I can drive you home, he offered, voice careful. Hazel hesitated, then nodded. One small allowance, not a surrender. They walked out together into the cold, like two people learning a new language. At the farmhouse, Hazel stood on the porch steps, key in hand. The same place where her life once fractured under stormlight. Snow fell softly now, almost peaceful, almost kind. Eric stayed at the bottom step, distance measured, eyes steady. I won't ask you to forgive me tonight, he said. I won't even ask you to trust me. He paused, breath visible in the dark. But I will be here tomorrow, if you let me. Hazel looked at the door, then at him, and felt the future hover, waiting for her choice. The next morning, Hazel woke before the alarm. Not because she was restless, but because her mind was awake on purpose. Snow clung to the window like lace, and the farmhouse felt quiet and steady. She lay there listening to the old house breathe. Years ago, silence had meant abandonment. Now it meant space, room to think, room to choose, room to lead her own life. And Hazel decided she would not let fear make her cruel. In the kitchen, her mother poured coffee without asking questions. She studied Hazel's face the way mothers do, reading what isn't said. Hazel sat at the table and wrapped her hands around the mug. I saw him, Hazel said softly, letting the truth land. Her mother's eyes lowered for a second, then lifted with calm restraint. And? She asked, not pushing, not hoping too loudly. Hazel swallowed. He's still here, she answered, and the room went quiet. The hospital took Hazel's attention before emotion could grow teeth. A flu outbreak, a broken arm, a toddler with a high fever. Hazel moved through it with steady authority, voice clean, hands sure. Eric showed up like he always had lately, before anyone asked, before praise existed. He ran supplies, coordinated rides, helped organize the clinic pantry. When an elderly woman panicked, Eric knelt to her level and listened. Hazel watched him with a heart that refused to be fooled twice. Maplewood Ridge began to notice too. Not his return. Everyone noticed that instantly. They noticed the difference. He didn't show up demanding a second chance. He showed up carrying boxes, shoveling walkways, fixing what had been neglected. He sat through planning meetings like a man willing to be corrected. He offered resources quietly, asking Hazel and the administrators what actually mattered. And the town, slowly, stopped whispering and started watching with respect. Hazel didn't allow the town's approval to sway her. People love redemption stories because they make pain feel tidy. Hazel knew pain is never tidy. She refused to become a symbol in someone else's narrative, so she kept her boundaries, even as Eric kept his consistency. She spoke to him when necessary, thanked him when it was honest, and nothing more. And in that firmness, something new began to form. Safety, without surrender. One evening, Hazel found Eric in the hospital chapel. It was a small room tucked behind the main corridor, quiet, dim, always open. He sat in the back pew with his hands clasped, head slightly bowed. Hazel paused in the doorway, surprised by the sight. Eric didn't look up right away, like he wasn't there to be seen. When he finally noticed her, he stood slowly, respectful, unarmed. "I come here when I don't trust myself," he admitted, voice low. Hazel stepped inside, letting the door close softly behind her. The chapel smelled faintly of old wood and candle wax. She didn't sit next to him. She sat 2 pews away. Distance wasn't punishment. It was truth about where her heart still was. Eric nodded, accepting it without resentment. "I used to pray for success," he said, staring forward. "Now I pray for character because success without it nearly destroyed me." Hazel's throat tightened, and she hated that honesty could still move her. "I prayed too," she said, surprising herself. Eric turned slightly, careful not to press. Hazel's voice stayed steady, but her words carried years. "I prayed that I wouldn't become bitter. I prayed that I wouldn't disappear. And I prayed that if you ever came back, I'd have wisdom. Because my heart can't afford another winter like that." Eric's eyes shone, and he nodded like he had just been corrected by grace. "I don't deserve your prayers," he whispered. Hazel's gaze stayed calm, firm. "No," she said, "you don't." Eric exhaled, accepting the truth without argument. "But I'm grateful you survived them," he added, voice breaking slightly. Hazel looked down at her hands and felt the ache of being seen too late. The weeks that followed were made of small proofs. Eric never demanded Hazel's time, but he was always available when the town needed him. He funded repairs and upgrades, but never acted like money was a substitute for trust. He started a long-term partnership with the hospital board, paperwork signed and committed. He offered scholarships for local nursing students and rural health training. And he asked Hazel to oversee the program, not as a gesture, but as accountability. It was a promise written in structure, not romance. Hazel challenged him, and he let her. When he suggested an outreach idea that felt too corporate, Hazel corrected him. When he moved too fast in a meeting, Hazel slowed the plan down. Eric didn't sulk. He adjusted. He listened like being corrected didn't threaten his identity anymore. Hazel watched for defensiveness, the old Eric's favorite armor. But this Eric seemed to have traded armor for humility. One night after a community meeting, Hazel stepped outside into cold air. The streetlights glowed warm against fresh snow. Eric followed, stopping several feet away like distance was a language he respected. "I owe you something," he said softly. Hazel lifted her chin. "You owe me a lot," she replied, plain. Eric nodded. "Not words," he said. "A truth I avoided." Hazel's heartbeat stayed steady, but her stomach tightened. Truth always costs something. Eric's voice dropped, raw and unpolished. "I left because I was afraid," he confessed. "Afraid I wouldn't be enough. Afraid I'd fail. Afraid you'd see I was just unformed." He swallowed, eyes fixed on the snow between them. "So I ran toward achievement because achievement doesn't ask you to be vulnerable." Hazel stared at him, feeling the old anger stir. "And you made me pay for that fear," she said quietly, and his face tightened with shame. Eric nodded, shoulders lowering further. "Yes," he whispered. "I did." Hazel's breath came out like smoke, steady and controlled. Her pain didn't need him to explain it. She had lived it in her bones. But his confession did something unexpected. It removed the lie she once carried, that she wasn't enough to make him stay. Hazel's eyes stung as that old burden loosened for the first time. "Don't ask me to forgive you because you're honest now," Hazel said. Eric looked up, eyes serious. "I won't," he replied immediately. Hazel continued, voice calm but heavy. "I don't forgive fast. I don't trust fast. I don't fall apart to prove I cared. Eric nodded. I know, he said, and the acceptance was steady, not performative. Then he added, I'm not asking for your heart. I'm asking for the chance to keep showing you mine is different. Hazel stood there, snow falling softly around them. She realized forgiveness wasn't a single decision. It was a sequence, like rehabilitation after injury. Painful, slow, repetitive, honest. She looked at Eric and saw a man finally willing to do the repetitions, not for applause, but because he could no longer live as the man he used to be. And Hazel felt something shift. Not surrender, but possibility. In early February, the town hosted a winter fundraiser for rural outreach. The community center filled with warm lights, cocoa, laughter, and quiet hope. Hazel wore a simple dress and a coat her mother insisted on steaming. Eric arrived without fanfare, helping set chairs, greeting families with respect. When Hazel spoke on stage about the program, the room listened like she mattered. Eric didn't watch her like a man reclaiming a past. He watched her like a man honoring a woman he had to earn the right to admire. After the fundraiser, Hazel stepped outside into the snow-lit night. Eric followed, still keeping distance until she stopped and faced him. The air between them held years, and yet it felt strangely new. Hazel's voice was quiet, but it carried a decision made with wisdom. I'm not ready to give you forever, she said. Eric nodded, jaw tight with patience. But I'm ready, Hazel continued, to see if you can deserve my present. Hazel didn't call it dating. She didn't call it starting over either. She called it what it really was. A test of consistency. Eric respected that language like it was sacred. He didn't try to rewrite her boundaries into something softer for his comfort. He simply showed up, again and again, where real life happened, and Hazel watched, not with fantasy, with wisdom. Their time together looked nothing like a movie at first. It looked like coffee after night shifts, quiet rides on icy roads. It looked like Eric fixing a broken clinic door hinge while Hazel updated charts. It looked like shared silence that didn't beg to be filled. Hazel asked hard questions and Eric answered without defensiveness. When Hazel pulled back, Eric didn't punish her with distance. He stayed steady, proving love could survive patience. One morning, Hazel found him in the outreach garage early. He was labeling supply bins with a marker, handwriting careful. Bandages, glucose kits, portable monitors, blankets, water. Hazel watched from the doorway, something warm tightening in her chest. Eric looked up, startled like he'd been caught doing something sincere. He offered a small smile, no charm behind it. I figured the faster we find things, the faster we save lives, he said simply. Hazel nodded, swallowing the strange urge to cry. Not from sadness, from the shock of being considered. Eric stepped back to give her room, but Hazel didn't leave. She walked closer, fingers brushing the edge of a supply shelf. You're still here, she said softly, almost to herself. Eric's gaze held hers, steady, unbegging. Yes, he replied. I'm still here. That's the point. Weeks passed, and the town's outreach program became real in visible ways. New equipment arrived. Rural routes expanded. A second van was purchased. Scholarships were awarded to 2 young women who dreamed of nursing careers. Hazel trained new volunteers with calm authority. Eric attended meetings, signed long-term commitments, and never treated it like charity. He treated it like responsibility, like restoration that deserved structure. And Hazel realized redemption isn't a feeling, it's a system built to last. Then one afternoon, Maplewood Ridge faced a crisis that tested everything. A sudden barn fire on the west side of town. Smoke, panic, sirens. Families evacuated. A teenager rushed to the hospital with burns on his hands. Hazel moved through the ER like muscle memory and mercy combined. Eric showed up at the scene before anyone asked, coordinating water, generators, shelter. He didn't freeze. He didn't disappear. He didn't delegate and walk away. He stayed until the last person had a blanket and a safe place to sleep. Later that night, Hazel found him outside the hospital, shoulders dusted with ash. His hands were cracked from cold and work, eyes tired but clear. He looked at her like he was waiting to be corrected again. Instead, Hazel stepped closer than she had ever allowed since his return. "You stayed," she said, voice quiet but full of weight. Eric's throat tightened. "Of course I stayed," he replied. "That's what I should have done years ago." Hazel nodded once, and in that nod was something like release. The next day, Hazel took him to the farmhouse, not as a romantic gesture, as an act of truth. The porch steps were dusted with new snow, the same door, the same light. Hazel stood there, keys in hand, breath steady. "This is where you left," she said. Eric looked at the door like it was a judge. "I know," he whispered, voice low with reverence and shame. Hazel opened the door and let him step inside. Her mother greeted him with calm politeness, no warmth given cheaply. Eric didn't try to charm her, didn't try to earn easy forgiveness. He offered help, carrying groceries, fixing a squeaky hinge, clearing the walkway. Hazel watched the interaction carefully. Her mother's eyes softened only when Eric didn't demand anything from that softness. And Hazel realized, true change doesn't rush elders either. After dinner, Hazel walked Eric outside into the cold night. The fields were quiet, sleeping under a thin white blanket. The sky held stars like scattered promises. Eric stood beside her, hands in his coat, respectful silence between them. Hazel spoke first, because she had learned courage wasn't loud. "I'm not the girl you left," she said. Eric turned to her, eyes steady. "I know," he replied. "You're the woman who survived me." Hazel inhaled, letting the truth settle into her bones. "And I won't be loved by potential," she continued. "I won't be held by words that disappear in storms." Eric's jaw tightened, and he nodded slowly. "I won't ask you to," he said. Then he took a step closer, careful, like stepping toward fire. "I'm not here with potential. I'm here with proof." Hazel looked at him, and for the first time she let memory and present share space. She remembered his old laugh, his old dreams, the boy who wanted everything fast. And she saw the man who now chose patience, like discipline. She saw the way he served the town without needing applause. She saw the way he honored her strength without trying to claim it. Hazel's eyes burned, and she didn't wipe the tears away this time, because vulnerability wasn't weakness anymore. It was truth, returning home. Eric reached into his coat pocket slowly. Hazel tensed. Not fear, but caution learned through pain. He pulled out not a ring, not a dramatic promise. He pulled out a folded document and held it out carefully. "It's the contract," he said, voice quiet. 10 years of funding for the outreach program locked in. Hazel stared, stunned, because this was love, written in permanence. "Why show me this?" Hazel asked, voice shaking slightly. Eric's gaze held hers, unwavering. "Because I don't want you to trust my feelings," he said. "I want you to trust my choices." He swallowed, then added with quiet honesty, "I'm not asking you to save me. I'm asking you to let me stay and keep building what you already started." Hazel's breath hitched because for the first time, she felt safe enough to want. Hazel took the paper with hands that had learned how to carry heavy things. She read the first lines, then looked up at him. No grand speeches could compete with this kind of action. She stepped closer, closing the distance she used to protect like armor. Eric didn't reach for her first. He waited, still honoring her choice. Hazel lifted her hand and touched his cheek, slow, deliberate. And Eric closed his eyes like the touch was grace he didn't deserve. "I forgive you," Hazel said, voice quiet and trembling with truth. Not because the past didn't matter, but because the present was finally honest. Eric's breath broke and a single tear slipped free. "Not performance, just human. I'll spend my life proving you were right to," he whispered. Hazel shook her head gently. "No," she corrected, firm and loving. "You'll spend your life being the man you were created to be, and I'll choose you day by day." Eric nodded, and in that nod was a vow deeper than any ring. The kiss didn't come like fireworks. It came like sunrise after a long winter. Slow, warm, certain. Hazel leaned in first, and Eric met her with reverence, not hunger. The porch light glowed above them, casting soft gold on falling snow. For the first time in years, Hazel felt her heart settle instead of brace. and Eric held her like a man who had finally learned that love is staying. Weeks later, on a quiet New Year's morning reborn in their home, Hazel stood in the hospital hallway watching a new outreach nurse load supplies. The program was thriving, the town breathing easier, the future anchored. Eric approached from behind, slipping his hand into hers. Steady, familiar, earned. "I'm not leaving," he murmured, simple and absolute. Hazel turned to him with a smile that looked like victory, and together they walked forward. Not as a boy returning to a girl, but as a man and a woman building a love that redeemed them both. The town would never know every detail of what it cost Hazel to become whole. They saw the results. Her steady hands in the hospital, her calm voice in a crisis, the way she carried herself like a woman who had learned the difference between love and illusion. But Hazel knew the truth. She didn't heal because Eric came back. Eric came back because she healed. That was the real redemption. Not a man returning to rescue a broken girl, but a man returning humbled to meet the woman she became. Eric didn't erase the past. He didn't try to rewrite it into something softer. He honored it by refusing to repeat it. Day after day, he chose presence over pride, responsibility over excuses, actions over speeches. And Hazel, strong, wise, unshakable, didn't forgive him because he begged. She forgave him because he built something trustworthy with his own hands. Because love, when it's real, doesn't demand, it proves. Some evenings, they stood together outside the hospital after long shifts, watching snow fall under the streetlights like quiet grace. Hazel's fingers would lace through Eric's. No fear, no armor, no need to test him every second. Not because she forgot what happened, but because she finally believed that what happened wouldn't happen again. And on a night when the town gathered for the first outreach celebration, warm lights, cocoa, laughter rising into the winter air, Eric didn't make a speech about himself. He watched Hazel speak to the crowd, eyes full of reverence. Then, when she stepped down, he met her with a kiss that felt like a promise kept. Not loud, not dramatic, just earned. Later, under the farmhouse porch light, the same place where a storm once ended everything, Eric held Hazel close, forehead resting against hers. "I left a girl," he whispered. "And I came back to a woman who taught me what love actually is." Hazel smiled, tears shining but steady. "And I didn't wait," she replied softly. "I became." And together they chose a future built the only way a real future can be built. One day at a time, one honest action at a time, with love that didn't just return, but redeemed. If this story made you believe in love again, subscribe and comment, "I choose love," so I know you stayed until the end.